There's some other negative feedback when you are actually affecting the others. So it's not just that the runner is the fastest. It's a douchebag of a runner. I cannot say it any other way, because it also pushes all the others and just prevents them from winning. Okay? So that one that gets more FSH is actually affecting the others and make them less or lesser candidates, if you will. Oops. The follicle that will be most exposed to FSH will eventually become the dominant follicle. That's the guy with the smiley face, because the guy is going to win the Olympics. He's going to win the 200-meter race. For that specific month, there's only one winner. All the rest of these 35, 40 died. Next cycle, there will be another set of runners, a next Olympics. Okay, as I mentioned, not as I mentioned, now it's a new thing, okay? Now, during the early stage, remember that the follicle, not remember, but I'll just say that now, the follicle cells themselves, granulosa cells together with theca cells actually are the ones making estrogen. The granulosa cells are the ones secreting the estrogen. Estrogen is derived from what? Steroids. Derived from what, guys? Cholesterol. Where's the cholesterol coming from? The theca cells are kind of like bringing the cholesterol from the matrix. So you guys do not need to know the details of the biosynthesis of estrogen. That's not what I'm trying to say here. Just think about it as a combination, a cooperation, collaboration between the theca cells and the granulosa cells allows eventually the granulosa cells to synthesize and secrete estrogen. Okay? Now, if I start with just a little bit of granulosa cells, I have just a little bit of estrogen. I develop, the follicle starts to divide. They also nurse the oocytes, right? As they progress, they're becoming bigger. The follicle becomes bigger. I have more and more and more estrogen being secreted, right? So I start at low concentration and reach higher concentration. During all that time that we have lower and increasing estrogen levels, they inhibit secretion of LH and FSH, by the way, but I'll focus on LH, from the pituitary gland. Try to think, I'm going to give you a minute to think together, why do we need that? And we need that. What's the rationale with low estrogen levels increasing and increasing? Follicle cells basically are going to secrete, to inhibit secretion of LH and FSH. Okay, add FSH to the slide. Think about the rationale. Talk with each other. Let's think about it for a minute. So, sorry again for rushing you, but we need to do that. The whole thing, don't worry about it too much. Of course, record and make sure you process. But again, the question is, now I'm focusing on the follicular phase, not about the early follicogenesis, right? I am now the follicle. Imagine me surrounding an oocyte. I'm becoming bigger and bigger during those 14 days, right? I'm nursing the oocyte. This is great. I'm becoming bigger and bigger. I'm also secreting estrogen, right? I had to get FSH in order for me to develop, right? I'm going to be the winner here. But now, the more I grow, I secrete estrogen, I inhibit that center. It's not the brain in this case. I mean, it is the brain. It's next to the brain, pituitary gland, right? And I'm saying, don't send more FSH. What do I gain from that? Any ideas that you discussed in your groups? Anyone wants to give it a chance? Why is it so important? Think about my analogy. Think about that race. It's the Olympics. When we win, we need a gold medal for someone. Yes, Miranda? There will be too many winners. I just started the race, right? It's not the 35. It's the late part of the race, because so far we didn't have FSH at all, right? Now, we started a race. We are 5 of 6 running, right? Running. And we are competing. I don't want, as I'm starting, to have some new ones starting to run and so on and win over me. So what we're saying is that, okay, I'm good with my FSH, right, at some point. Don't send more FSH. Because if you send more FSH, maybe there will be some that are behind. In the Olympics, right, or in any athletic race, you start with the runner's line, someone is firing the gun, and you have a race. It's not that after 10 meters somebody else is joining the race, right? So that's a race for that month. And for that month, what we're saying basically, no more LH, no more FSH. Hopefully I'll be the one that wins. That's it. We're basically narrowing the race only to those who are winning. And if you think this is complicated, wait just a little bit, because everything is going to change. Yes, yeah. Thanks. Yes, so it's slow and increasing level of estrogen are still inhibiting and inhibiting. Okay, actually I can show you, this is the next part. What we see here, and again, focus just on the follicular phase, on the first 14 days in a 28-day cycle. Of course, it can vary, it can be 15 or 16 or 13. Progesterone is very low at this point. Actually, the cells, those granulosa cells, thicker cells, do not secrete progesterone at all. Estrogen is starting low, and as we grow, as the follicle grows and grows and grows, it secretes more estrogen. If we follow LH and FSH level, they are really, really low. Why? Because we inhibited them. We had to have a little bit of the beginning to start developing the follicle, but that's it. As we come really close to the end of the follicular phase, yes. Yes, if you have case when you have two mature follicles, and they will be fertilized by two different sperm, this is what you have in what we call non-identical twins. If it happens, it can happen. We're focusing here on the one, but it can happen. Okay? So again, I'm going back to the runner's line. Okay? So I am now inhibiting more and more estrogen, more inhibiting. At some point, the concentration goes up until I reach a threshold. And when I reach a threshold, the image is flipped. Not only that I stop inhibiting the pituitary gland, I'm actually stimulating the pituitary gland. So low estrogen levels inhibit secretion of LH from the pituitary gland, but at some point, just before the 14th day in a 28-day cycle, estrogen levels increase dramatically, and that leads to a surge of LH and FSH. Instead of inhibiting, suddenly I boom, stimulating. Surge, flood of LH and FSH. FSH will be important to some, but the main actor here is LH. The main new player in the game is LH. We'll see why in a second. I don't go into the molecular biology of how inhibiting becomes stimulating, but those who learn biology and genetics and molecular biology think about co-activators versus co-repressors. Then if what I say doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. Okay? You don't need to know the molecular biology. So we're not talking yet about the decline, we're just talking about the high estrogen. So let's see the high estrogen and the high LH. Let's see why we need it for. Remember now, I'm the follicle. I have the oocyte. The oocyte has grown because I fed it and nursed it, right? What else needs? I'm about to finish my job, right? And we are about to ovulate. What needs to happen when we ovulate? Let's think about some things that should happen during ovulation. Anyone wants to suggest some events that need to take place? Think about the oocyte first. What do we need to have? So far, I was what? What type of oocyte was in my follicle? Primary. We need to make it into a secondary, right? We need to continue with meiosis. Complete meiosis 1, going into meiosis 2. That's a big thing, right? What else? It's ovulation. So we need to tell the ovary wall, hey, start to reorganize your matrix, your wall. We need to ovulate an oocyte, an egg out of you. It's a big change. And then what else is going to happen after ovulation to all the follicle cells? They become what? Andrew? Corpus luteum, right? That's not something that happens in random. Someone needs to tell those cells, reorganize yourself, hey, become a gland. Make estrogen, make progesterone. That's a new thing, right? So these are the main events that happen. The one who's going to tell them is going to be LH. So, a lot of stuff here. Let's make sure we got it. So, again, the follicle develops, secretes estrogen, and that inhibits. But as we reach high, when we say high, it means above a threshold. It's about close to the 14th day. That stimulates. Blue is for stimulating. The arrow is stimulating the pituitary gland, and that will secrete. That's the number 5 LH. Estrogen level increase and hydrogen levels have a positive feedback effect. It's a positive feedback chain. In this case, on the pituitary, causing a sudden surge of LH. LH will promote three events that we just discussed. LH spike will stimulate the primary oocyte to complete meiosis 1 and get into meiosis 2. We need to have it before, because it's about to be the sperm, right? LH also triggers ovulation. Tons of molecular events need to happen, cellular events. That's what LH is going to stimulate. And finally, it's going to transform the ruptured follicle into a corpus luteum, which produces progesterone, estrogen, and another molecule called inhibin. And these are the red arrows coming from here. Estrogen, progesterone, inhibin. We talked about inhibin, the male version, same idea here. So process this a little bit, and then I'll ask you a question. Any questions just about the series of events here, and the events that are stimulated? And then I'll ask you a question. Could you give me some thumbs up or thumbs down, kind of like in the middle? How lost are you at this point? Okay, I have a lot of this and some like this. Again, I told you, I warned you. Again, you'll be fine, just process later on. Yes, sir. Yeah, why? Or the surge is secretion from the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, is the one making the LH. If now I'm sitting in the anterior pituitary gland, right? I secreted FSH back in the days, but then someone sent me estrogen and I'm inhibited, right? From now on, I'm doing nothing. I'm just waiting, relaxing 14 days, taking a nap. I'm getting more and more estrogen. I'm more and more inhibited. At some point, it reaches a threshold when I'm waking up and saying, oh my God, I need to make a lot of LH and FSH, but we'll focus on the LH. I'm releasing a lot of LH. What does LH do? 1, 2, 3. The same area from the follicle cells. They continue to do it. They just grow and secrete more and secrete more. At some point, they just reach that threshold. Exactly at the right time. The beautiful thing about it is that the whole system is regulating itself. Basically, it's the follicle developing into a certain point that is going to promote the next step. Any other question? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question about the last part. We said that the corpus luteum is important. We already mentioned that estrogen and progesterone are going to be important for what? For, how do you call this process? Remember later on, we need that in 6-7 days. Implantation, right? Anchoring of the embryo. Maybe there will be an embryo coming out of this. That's great. But it also does something else. Estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin, all of these together are going to do what to the pituitary? Red? They're going to inhibit. So, again, I'm in the pituitary gland. I release some FSH and LH. Now I went to sleep because I was inhibited by estrogen. Sleep, 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 sleep. Boom, somebody's waking me up. I'm making all the AJ and FSH. And then immediately after that, someone is telling me estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin, and I'm going to sleep again. What's the advantage here? Why do we need that? You have a question, or do you want to answer it? So let me wait with the question, okay? Why do we need that second inhibition? We had the negative feedback, positive feedback, and boom, negative feedback. What do we gain from the next negative feedback? Think a scientist. Think what would have happened if we did not have a negative feedback. What could have happened? Diego. I just had my Olympics race, right? We had the runners, some of them quit, some of them continue to compete, and then finally I have the winner. That winner, if the sperm is waiting, we have a result for the next 9 months for pregnancy, right? Do I want a new race starting? I don't. I'm going to have a second pregnancy. That's bad. That's not something that I want, right? So what am I doing? I'm shutting the system off. Because if the pituitary gland will continue to secrete endocrine, LH, and FSH, then there will be a new cycle coming in the next month, right? A new set of 20, 35 runners will start the race. I don't want that. I have my winner. If everything well works, and if the corpus luteum survives, I'm just basically turning the system off. Abby, and then Andrew.
So if we, as soon as the ovulation occurs and with the corpus luteum making more estrogen, wouldn't that lead to
Yes, but the estrogen is just one. Now you have progesterone and inhibin. If it was just estrogen, Abby is right, you continue to stimulate because you already had a lot of estrogen. At this point, estrogen is stimulating, but you have progesterone and inhibin that block the system. Andrew? If it's in high concentrations, yes. Inhibin blocks, completely blocks. Oh yeah.
Does the purpose
Lutein.
stay alive during your whole pregnancy so you don't ovulate?
Not during the whole pregnancy because at some point the placenta will replace the corpus luteum. But until the placenta is formed, the corpus luteum is responsible for secreting those estrogen, progesterone, and so on. Later on, the placenta will take care of everything. Okay? Yes? Olivia.
The variation,
Just speak a bit louder.
is the variation in how bad like certain symptoms are between women, does that have to do with the amount of estrogen in the cell?
It can be, Olivia is asking about how much you suffer from the period. It might has to do with the levels of hormones. We'll talk about the uterine cycle shortly. I really need to move to that part, okay? But it doesn't have to be. There's so many things that are affected by those hormones that maybe one is suffering from more bleeding, for example. I really apologize for that. I'm just the messenger. I did not make this whole thing work, okay? So, the corpus luteum, the pituitary, LH, and FSH, the ones that came from the pituitary, and the ovarian estrogen together allowed for development of the follicle, maturation of the oocytes, from primary to secondary, and development of the whole oocyte cytoplasm, and eventually ovulation. The last stage, forming the corpus luteum, provides the final negative feedback that will prevent any more ovulations in this cycle. And if fertilization will continue, remember the corpus luteum will continue to prevent, so it won't be just this cycle, it will be for the next 9 months of pregnancy. We'll even come back to this point, but at this point, I also want to mention something that we're familiar with. Estrogen and progesterone will have another major role, and that will prepare the uterus. We'll talk about that. So let's talk a bit about the uterus, and then we'll combine both cycles today. So just to introduce you the endometrium, this is the uterus, and this is the uterus wall here, and we're talking about the mucosal lining, the lining the tissue that faces the lumen, the site of the implantation. In about 6-7 days, the embryo has to be implanted. When we focus on the endometrium, it looks not extremely different from the digestive system, from the mucosa. We have glands that secrete different hormones, so on and so forth. We also have these what we call spiral arteries. These arteries spasm all the time. They contract, they dilate, they constrict. I don't want to go into details so much. I will just say that if nothing is signaled, at some point they lead to the collapse of most, not all, but most of the endometrium. So the generation and regeneration, including spasms, which we're not going to go into the details of the spiral arteries, causes the tissue to shed during menstruation, during the period. And this is what we're familiar with as what we call the period typically, right? The bleeding part. The bleeding is basically vessels together with tissue that comes from the endometrium. When we look at, this is also happening in a cycle. When we look at a cycle, this is going to be the uterine cycle. Above, I put the ovarian cycle. You're already familiar with this? Again, the follicular phase, growing, eventually ovulation after 14 days in a 28-day cycle, and then formation of the corpus luteum. So let's focus this time on the endometrium, the uterine cycle, but every now and then we'll see how the ovarian cycle is controlled. We start in the first 5 days with what we call the menstrual phase. Most of the endometrium, not everything, we have some stem cells over there, but most of the endometrium is being shed off because of those spiral arteries. There was no signal at this point. This is what we call the menses, the bleeding part. Why did we have the menstrual phase in this specific uterine cycle? What happened before that in the previous cycle? What do you think? Did we have fertilization in the previous cycle? No, we didn't. We didn't have any successful fertilization. Maybe there were no sperm. Maybe there was sperm and fertilization did not take place. So now at some point we don't have any signals. And that means that now we're going to take this off. Again, I'm about to answer the question about the energy and so on. Why we need this. But now, after 5 days, it's the time to start a new set of endometrium. We have to have an endometrium. Two things need to happen. First, cells need to proliferate, so we'll have a lot of cells, right? A lot of endometrium wall. But it's not enough. There are glands, we need to secrete stuff, different molecules, never mind which they are, that will be essential for nurturing the young, early embryo as it goes under implantation. And we need both of these. So it's not just to make a lot of cells and to make a new wall, but also to secrete stuff. The first event, the proliferative phase, just easily remember, proliferative phase, meaning cells proliferate. The remaking of the new wall is stimulated by a hormone called estrogen. Where do we get the estrogen from at this point? We are still before ovulation, remember. So where do we get the estrogen from? From the follicle cells, remember? They are the ones who secreted estrogen and estrogen and estrogen. Not just going to the pituitary gland, it goes to the uterus as well. So we have proliferative phase, estrogen secreted from the ovarian follicles, stimulates endometrium recovery. But as I said, we are not ready yet. We still need glands that have to secrete some stuff. What do you think will be the hormones that is required? Estrogen needs to have to continue throughout the time, all the time. But it's not just estrogen. What else? Which hormone do you think will trigger, stimulate the making the secretion from the glands? The final part? 1, 2, 3. Progesterone. Where do I get progesterone? Remind me. Do the follicle cells secrete it at this point? No. Only the corpus luteum. Only after ovulation took place, the corpus luteum. Again, think about the logic. Oh, just for ovulation. Oh, maybe we'll have fertilization. Oh, in 7 days we're going to prepare the wall. We have an embryo coming there. Let's make sure we are finishing the wall. We're secreting progesterone. This is called the secretory phase. Secretory because we secrete different molecules from the glands, never mind which they are, just to complete the preparation of the endometrium. You can see how the uterine wall is regulated by the uterine cycle, is regulated by the ovarian cycle. It depends on the estrogen in the beginning, and later on in estrogen and progesterone at the end. Don't have a lot of time. Okay. Let's think about it for a second. Let's say fertilization took place. We are all very happy. We have estrogen and progesterone, right? What happens to the corpus luteum? Survives, right? We said, if fertilization took place. So, estrogen and progesterone, what do they do to the pituitary gland? Inhibit. We're happy. We have endometrial wall, we'll have an embryo, pregnancy, we're all happy, right? What happens if fertilization had not taken place? What happens to the corpus luteum? Stops secreting dies, stops secreting estrogen and progesterone. What happens to the endometrium? It's going into the next cycle. It's going to be the menses of the next period. That's your period, right? Because we had an unsuccessful fertilization. Now I want to address the question Ahaj asked before. Females, wouldn't you like the idea, we'll make a wall once and for all, we just keep the wall, and instead of breaking it down and rebuilding it, and breaking it down and rebuilding it, which is so much energy, right, and so much suffering, we'll just have a wall, and we'll all be happy. You have an embryo, great. You don't have an embryo, you just have a wall without an embryo. Who cares, right? That's a question, actually, just to make you a bit more frustrated. Humans are not the only, but one of the very few mammals that actually have this degrading and rebuilding of that wall. In most mammals, they just have the wall for eternity. Wouldn't it be nice? So there are many scientists who try to understand why the waste of all that energy. I don't have a good answer for you, but I would say the consensus and probably the winning hypothesis or theory that explains this is just it's simply too costly to maintain the human endometrium, the glands and everything. It just takes more energy than to break it down and then just building up when you need it. That's probably the case. If that's the reason, I don't know, but that's the way it evolved. For the final part of this, okay, I'm only telling you that I'll probably steal 1 or 2 minutes after the class to make sure we cover everything. Okay? Let's say what we just said. If we have progesterone secreted from the corpus luteum, if there is no fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates, no progesterone and estrogen, back to the menstrual phase, right? So if we have fertilization, we do need the corpus luteum to survive. We understand that, right? How on earth does the corpus luteum know that fertilization took place? We have an embryo. Did the embryo start shouting, hey, I'm here, please wait, don't die, secrete LH? How does it yell? How does it yell? What does it do? It's going to secrete a hormone that comes only from the embryo. That hormone is not exactly LH, but very similar to LH, so it does exactly the same. It's not going to be the pituitary gland, but it's going to be that product. The product is the embryo. Not in the beginning, but after a while, 1,000 cells or so. But they're going to secrete. That hormone is called human for HCG. Who knows what HCG is also used for? Anyone knows? HCG would be secreted only by, or almost only by, we'll just say stick with almost by, only by the embryo after successful fertilization. So what do you think it can tell us? It can report us of what? That's your pregnancy test. That's the levels of HCG because it can come only from the embryo. If you have high levels of HCG, it means you have an embryo that secreted that HCG. So what happened is that the corpus luteum got a surge from LH, right? That's what allowed it. But then there's no more LH because of the negative feedback. But if there was successful fertilization, the corpus luteum is going to continue to get HCG that is basically just like LH. So the corpus luteum will survive and pregnancy will take place. And the last thing I want to say about that, who asked about the pill and other, yes, Dana, right? What do we do if we take the pill? The pill has different versions, but in general, what we're talking about is mainly progesterone with some assistance for estrogen. What we do, we are cheating the system. Progesterone is coming from where and affecting the pituitary gland? Remind me, guys. Talk about so many things today, so let's see if we remember. The corpus luteum, right? But that's progesterone. But if you're not really pregnant, then the corpus luteum will die, right? So what do you do instead? You're just giving progesterone. Pituitary gland gets progesterone. It doesn't know who gave it to it. Maybe it was the pharmacist, or maybe it was the corpus luteum. It stops secreting LH and FSH. What you're telling the body, hey, I'm pregnant. You're not really pregnant, but you're telling the endocrine system, I'm pregnant, would you take the pill? Right? If you had taken that 365 days a year, you will not have a period because you will stop all the menses, but you don't, right? Because you have used the break. And if you probably know that if you stop taking the pill, if you want to get pregnant, typically it takes a bit of time until the whole endocrine system is being reestablished because of all the changes. But the idea of the pill is to mimic, if you will, fertilization and pregnancy. Last question about this. I know we have so many questions about this, but I just want to finish with it.
Basically the same. Why do some people have a bad reaction?
Because just like answered Olivia, hormones are hormones. You cannot just have something, a hormone, and it will affect that small thing that you really want it to affect. It has all the impacts and everything, right? And don't forget, these are the 6 hormones that we talk about, so they affect so many systems, and sensitivity, receptors, our brain perception, what have you. Okay. We have about 5 minutes, right? Okay. So I'm not going to go into all the details, 4 minutes, into all the details that we went through the male sexual response. When we talk about the male sexual response, what was the major hormone responsible for the male sexual response? Testosterone. So which female hormone is responsible for that? What do you think? Estrogen is one option. What else? Progesterone. Anyone wants to suggest something else? These are not the ones affecting thermosexual response. The hormones responsible for that is going to be testosterone, the same hormone. Not testosterone, but the derivative of testosterone. Females make testosterone. And that's the one responsible for this. Again, the same issue, hypothalamus. I'm not going to go into the details, okay? These are androgens, male hormones that actually the female synthesizes. There are a lot of details here. I don't need to remember the details. The idea here is that it's basically the same system, homologous system. Okay? We don't have real ejaculation, but we do have physical erection. We have the clitoris. We have a lot of stuff that goes on. Again, I don't have the time. And we have the orgasm. We have the idea of high blood pressure, right? Increased heartbeat, blood rate. Again, we want in evolution for the male and for the female to want to have that sex, so we'll have the next generation. That's the idea. And it's not surprising they are so similar.